Hi guys, Samantha from Jessama Tutorials here, and this is the second part in our Into the Congo bracelet tutorial. And so this is the sheet that we made, and so this is what we are going to be using to create our bracelet. So I'm going to bring over a sheet of translucent Polymer that I have rolled out on the thinnest setting of my pasta machine, and I'm going to place that over the polymer clay, gently going to smooth over. And you want to be smoothing like this to get rid of air bubbles. Okay, just like that. And just go back and make sure that you don't have air bubbles, because that will really ruin the effect later on, because the translucent doesn't take well to air bubbles. Okay, then just trim up around the edges like that, and put that translucent back in your translucent clay packet. And it's translucent Polymer. I'm not sure if I said that already, I'm pretty sure I did. Anyway, just trim up around here and over here, and keep these because they're nice scraps. Okay, so that's the first part, and now we will move on to the mica shift, which is going to be another part of the bracelet. And just before we move on to the mica shift, I just wanted to show you this pendant over here. It is another part of the tutorial that I will be doing. I've already recorded it, and so this is going to be available on my Patreon membership at the $3 level if you guys are interested. I'll be showing the bracelet, but I just decided to do another project, but it will only be available on Patreon on the $3 level. So if you're interested, I'll provide a link in the description and you can check that out. Now we will move on to the mica shift. Okay, so I've done a mica shift as well to go with the bracelet, and so I've just cut off a piece of the sheet that we made, because I only need a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be cutting out circles. And I'm using a fairly large cutter. And now you can get this cutter off of Linda's Art Spot. She's got the whole set of them, and so I'll provide a link to that. So now I'm just trying to figure out the best position for you guys. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from one end. I'm going to cut out circles. Excuse me if my head happens to get in. Okay, there we go. Now I'm just gently going to lift that up, and I'm going to try not to distort it. And now this mica shift was done using Helen Breil's texture stamp, the same one that we used for these ones. So you can see that it gives a good mica shift if you spend enough time, but it takes a little bit longer than other texture stamps, and it's a little bit harder, but you can get a good mica shift. So now what I'm going to do is I'm trying to get this to fit around it nicely, and you don't have to worry if it's a perfect circle. But you do want to place these in carefully. And so I do that with all of these circles until I've filled in all of them. Okay, now bring over my acrylic roller and just roll it flat so you get rid of any seams. Like that, so that it starts to form one piece of clay again, because you don't want these pieces lifting up on you. section as well. And you just want to spend a good amount of time making sure that you have got these pieces all together. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim up the edge over here, because I know that I'm not going to need any more than that for the bracelet. And we're going to be using this bracelet cuff, and this I also got off of Linda's Art Spot, and I'll provide a link to that so you can get your own bracelet cuff as well. And then we'll just lift this up, and now we need to put a backing on this, so I'll bring over some clay for that. Okay, so here's a piece of silver that I've run through on the thickest setting of my pasta machine, and I'm just gonna pop that on the back. Okay, and then I'll pick that up and smooth it out to make sure that I get rid of the air bubbles. Okay, and then I'm just going to trim away this excess. On each side. Okay, and that's what we'll work with for the moment. Then I'll bring over the blank, and we might need to stretch this just a little bit. Okay. Then what we'll do is we'll flip it. Oh no, we won't actually. What I want to do is I want to start it on one side of the blank, just stick it down, and then I will wrap it around. And now I want to be getting those blue pieces, so I'm just struggling to get this on camera because I need to be looking at this a little bit more closely. There we are. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm just gently going to press the blank, this down onto the blank so that we get an impression, and then I'm going to peel it away. Okay, and then I'm going to bring over this, and I'm just going to trim a little bit outside of those lines. Okay, and then we're left with the silver, which can go back in the packet. Okay, also left with the silver, that can go back in the packet, and then I'm not going to trim up those ends. Okay, so it wasn't a perfect trim up, it's just enough so that we don't have too much material hanging off each end, if you know what I mean. Okay, and then we'll place that back on. And just make sure that you do that right. And then we can trim away our excess later. I just want to make sure that I'm getting it on the blank. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just gently going to make sure that it's stuck on well, because this next part we want this to be stuck on really well. So I'm going to bend over these edges as well. Because we're going to start trimming up. And don't worry about fingerprints at this point either, because that we can fix later. Okay. There we are. Now I'm going to bring over my tissue blade. I'm going to start on one end and I'm going to trim away this excess, and you want to try and hold your blade as flat as you can. Okay. There we are. And I'll just do the other side as well. Then I'll flip and repeat on this side. Okay, and then we're going to do these ends as well. You just got to make sure that you find the end. Okay, and then that comes off easily. Okay, now we can go into the refinement process where we round up these corners and get our shape all proper. Okay, then I'm going to hold it in my fingers because I'm wanting to get rid of all these fingerprints. So the inside of the bangle is metal, so if I hold it and brace it against my fingers, I'm not going to be touching the raw clay area, so I can now smooth out the fingerprints using the palm of my hand. Sorry, I went out to camera there. You can use the base of your finger as well. Just smooth around and just touch the inside if you have to touch anything or maneuver anything, because you don't want to be touching any areas that have raw clay now unless you're smoothing it, because we're trying to get rid of all those fingerprints. You can see that already, that's getting rid of the fingerprints. Okay, and this might distort the edges a little bit, so just go around with your finger and keep going out of camera, sorry. Just go around the edges and flatten it out with your finger. Then I'm going to flip, and I'll do the same on the other side. Just make sure that these edges are nice. And then just spend a bit of time making sure that you smooth off all the ends and everything. And there we go. So this is going to look nice once we've sanded it. But just make sure you spend enough time refining it. And now your bracelet needs to be fairly thick in the beginning, because polymer clay, when baked properly, is fairly flexible, so you need to just make sure that you do it pretty thick, and then the backing is going to be fairly thin, because this inside area is the amount of space you want for your bracelet for it to fit on your hand, so you need to make sure that it's thick enough the first time around when you put it on the base. I hope I made sense there. Now I just want to kind of round off these edges. I don't want it to be a straight cut, I want it to be kind of domed a little bit. And you can do what you want at the moment, just refine it the way you like it, because the more you do while it's raw, the easier it will be for you afterwards, because you don't want to have to be sanding and things like that. So the more you do now, the better. And we'll fix up these sides and the back on the next bake. But for now, we just want to be focusing on the front. Okay, so that's pretty good. I think I've gotten rid of pretty much all the fingerprints. So now I'm going to go pop this in the oven for a full hour at Primo's recommended temperature. Okay, so the bracelet is out of the oven, and you can see that those pieces have cleared up dramatically, and the microchip is better as well. Now it's fairly stuck to this cuff at the moment, which I'm going to use to my advantage, as I want to do a bit of sanding now before I take off the cuff. And the reason for that is just because it's firmer, because it is on a metal base, and also because it's nicely stuck there, and it'll just be easier to sand the front now than later. And we're not going to be fine sanding, we're just going to be doing the bulk of the heavy sanding to get rid of fingerprints and marks and things like that. So we'll be doing a bit of sanding later on. So I'm going to bring over my polishing cloths, and this is a 400 grit, and I've got a pad of them because these are all the ones that I've used, and then my latest one is at the top, and it just gives me a bit of a hold on the situation. And so I'll just start sanding, and I'll basically go up through all the grits to about 1,000. I'd usually go up to about 8,000 if I was making this nice and shiny ready for buffing, but I just want to do the bulk of the sanding work at the moment just to get rid of fingerprints and shiny spots and things like that, because we still need to put a backing on and we still need to do the sides. So this is just to get rid of any problems that might be there, because it's just easier to do it now than later. So I'll just basically carry on doing this, and then we can come and do the backing. Okay, so I finished sanding. Now, being me, I couldn't resist sanding to the highest grit I could to get it to see how it's going to look. And I'm really happy that I did take that time to do it. Just took me a little bit longer, but you can see it has a nice shimmer at the moment, but I can see how lovely that microchip's going to be, and it's cleared up this translucent really nicely, so I can see exactly what it's going to look like. So I'm really happy with that. But now we need to remove it from the cuff. So just on each end, flick it up, and it comes off super easy, and this means that you can reuse this over and over again if you wanted to. Okay, now the inside is fairly shiny and it's okay, but I want to put on a nice backing. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring over some coarse sandpaper, and this is 40 grit because I want to create some scratches for our clay to have some space to hold on to. So I'm just going to be careful just to scratch the bottom side of this, and I'm not sure if you can see this on the camera. No, you can't really see it very well. I'm just creating scratches, just a little bit, just to get rid of that wasn't perfect, just to get rid of that smooth surface, because that's going to be a little hard for our clay to hang on to. We just need a little bit of scratches, and then I'll just get rid of that and brush it off, and then that inside has a little bit more tooth to it. Then I'm going to bring over some bacon bond, and I'm just going to squeeze out a little bit around the rim. Now I don't want to put too much, because otherwise this is going to slip, and the piece of clay that I'm going to put on here is going to slip and slide all over the place, and then it's going to be even harder to work with. Just want enough that it creates a little bit of just helps the piece of clay to stick. So I'm just going to smooth that around the outside, and so you can see this is quite flexible, it's moving around. That's quite normal, and that's why we wanted to make it fairly thick, because otherwise it runs around like an elastic band. And I'll show you a bracelet that I made earlier that was too thin. Okay, and I'm just smoothing around inside here to make sure that I don't have too much in any one area and that I cover up all the areas. Okay, and there we are. Then I'm going to bring over a microchip sheet that I made earlier, and this is using the Helen Breil stamp again. And now this is a little bit tricky because, well, we're working on the inside of the stamp, so it's just a little bit harder to do stuff. So we're going to start on one end, gently going to pop that down, and I'm going to kind of loop this inside. And this is why we want that bacon bond there, because it will help this stick, which makes the process easier. But it's why we don't want too much bacon bond, because then the process is very hard because it slips around all over the place. So I'm just going and sticking it to the edges of the walls. And I'm going to go over onto this side as well. And don't worry about fingerprints, like before, we can tend to those afterwards. For now, we just want to make sure that we're going to stick this down properly so that it sticks to the back. Okay? And now I'm going to just bring this up so that we can shave it off nicely. Here we go, we want that out the way. Okay. Then I'm going to go and bend over this end as well. And don't worry about the edges, that will be the next part. Now you need to be careful because you don't want to be slicing through your polymer clay. The baked bit, that is. So just when you're doing this, do it lightly. And the raw stuff should come off pretty easily. Okay, and I'm just going to slice this off to make it easier for me. Going to come around, and I'm being very careful not to cut myself, so don't worry, I'm being very careful when I press my finger up against the edge of the blade over here. I'm using one of my duller pieces, so this isn't my nice new one, this is one of my older ones which I like to use when I'm doing this because I don't want to cut myself accidentally. I've never actually cut myself on the tissue blades, surprisingly. Okay, so we're trimming up the edges over here. Just cleaning up so we don't have bits floating around. Okay, and then just tend to the edges to make sure that you're happy with them. And this end should be pretty easy because this was laid flat when we were attaching the microchip piece. Yeah, so you want a nice flat surface. And so the bracelet is going to look pretty thick, but it's necessary for this because otherwise it moves all over the place. So you can see it, this moves around really easily, which is good because it makes it easy for you to put it onto your wrist. But it means that if you make it too thin, it's going to be way too flexible. So now I'm just busy flicking off these last little bits and smoothing around these corners because I want them to be rounded and not have any corners to them, or to be nice round corners with no sharp points. Okay, and then go around the edges over here and smooth them off as well because you don't want them to be sharp, you want them to kind of be rounded as well. Okay, and then we'll tend to the fingerprints. Okay, just go and tend to areas, make sure it's stuck down properly. That bacon bond, once baked, will make sure that it sticks properly. Now I'm just going to go around the inside with my finger, ironically, and I'm going to smooth out those fingerprints. You want to make sure that you get rid of those before you bake, otherwise it's going to be a bit of a pain to sand those out, especially on the inside of the bracelet. The outside isn't too difficult to sand, but the inside is quite difficult. So just take your time to do your finishing processes properly and you'll be thankful for it later on. Okay, so I hope you can see the inside there, it's all nice and finished off. And now the edges we're going to do later, we're just going to do a quick smear around the edges, but for now we want to bake that. Now this can't go back onto the blank because obviously the blank is too big. This is going to go into the oven as is. It's going to rest on my tile like that, and then I'm going to be careful when I take it out not to distort its shape because when it's hot, you can easily distort the shape, so wait for it to cool before you take it out the oven. Now I'm going to bake this for another hour at Primo's recommended temperature, and I'll bring over the other bracelet while we wait for it just to show you why your bracelets need to be nice and thick. Okay, so while that's in the oven, I'll show you the bracelet that I made, and this was using the technique that we used in the other bracelet, so you can see how that looks. And you can see that it's not quite very thick, it's about the thickest setting on my pasta machine in all, but look what you can do with it. So that's not very good for a bracelet. You don't want to be able to do that. So I can, you know, elastic band, can do whatever I want with it. Now this means that your clay is baked. Your clay is supposed to do this, but you can see that for a bracelet this isn't very good because it's going to go out of shape. It's going to slip off your hand and it's just not very good. So you want to make sure that you make your bracelet thick enough. Okay, so our bracelet is finished baking and it just came out of the oven, and so you can see that it's quite flexible, but I dare not do what I did with the other one because I'd probably end up breaking it. It's flexible, which means that it's baked properly, but it's strong enough that it's going to hold on your hand and not fall off. So this is about twice my thickest setting. And you can see it inside, we have that nice mica shift, and on the outside that's ready to go, but we do need to do the sides. So I'll bring over some silver Polymer and I'll just warm it up in my hands quickly. Okay, now just roll this into a ball. And then we're going to do basically what you do with a Jessama smear. I'm just going to smear it along the outside of the bracelet. Very easy. There you go. And I'll just go around and tidy that up. Because you want to make sure that all these edges are nice, finished properly. And if you need to, you might need to go back and smear another end around an edge. So over here I can see that this isn't as covered up as I'd like, so I'll just take a piece, smear over there and smooth it out. And this clay is very soft. It's a pretty fresh piece of Primo, so it works really well for this technique when it's nice and soft. So I'm just going to make sure that I get it right, and then you just smooth it with your fingers to make sure that you've got out all the kinks and things like that. Okay, and then you do the exact same on the other side and on the edges as well. Over here you need to make sure that you get between there. Okay, and so I'll carry on doing that and I'll show you what it looks like when it's baked. Okay, so it's finished baking and I have gone and sanded it as well just to save time, just like we did before. So I've sanded the inside, the sides and the outside from a 400 grit all the way up to an 8000. So you can see that it has quite a nice sheen to it at the moment. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring it over some Renaissance wax, and this is what it looks like. And I'm just going to bring it over an old polishing paper, and I'm going to use the back because I find that these are quite nice when it comes to this sort of thing. Yeah, put that to the side, and then I'll just gently brush over a light coat of Renaissance wax on the top, on the sides, and in here. Just like that. And then you want to buff it as much as you can to get it to shine nicely, and then that will be it. There we are. So I hope you can see what a big difference that has made. It's really nice and sparkly now, so that mica shift's really come out. And the inside, hopefully I can direct that for you, but the inside's really nice and shiny as well. So I'm overall really happy with how that looks. It's nice and shiny and it looks really nice. So I do hope that tutorial was helpful to you, and if it was, please do let me know, as that is always helpful to me. And please do check the links below, as there'll be a link to my website jessamatutorials.com there, where you can see other tutorials like this one. You can also send in pictures of what you've made using this tutorial, and I always look forward to seeing those. And there will also be a link down there to my Polymer Clay membership, where I post tutorials once every single month, and I also have bonus tutorials and other things on there that I'm sure you guys won't want to miss. So be sure to check that out, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye for now.